Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm Sean Lavana. I'm here along with Jermaine to help run this webinar today. I'm curious, just as we get started here, we're 1 minute shy of actually starting. If you can type in into the chat box, into the questions box, where you're listening in from, it'll help me know that you can hear me loud and clear. And it's just always kind of fun to see where everybody's at today. So when you get a moment, as everybody's kind of coming into this, chat where you're listening in from. We'll read a few out here, confirm that you can hear us, and then we'll get going. All right, thanks everybody. Looks like we got some people coming in from all over today. We have Denver, Boston, London, the UK. I can go on and on looking through the list right now, but appreciate you typing that in. Hey, New Jersey. Appreciate you typing that in so that we can make sure that this is off to a good start. So, hey, again, I'm Sean. I'm joined by Jermaine today. We're excited to talk to you about a brand new offering from Cloud Academy, pre-hire assessments. On today's talk, we'll cover the basics, the why, the how. We'll walk you through what it looks like in your instance. We'll answer any questions that you might have, and obviously we'll go through a demo as well. We'll do our best to answer everything in the 30 minutes that we have here today, but if we can't get to everything, we'll follow up right after with any kind of outstanding questions. By the way, we are recording today's call, and we'll be able to share a recording of today's call after that as well. So, with that kind of upfront out of the way, here's what we're looking at today. We're going to cover the hiring process. How do you make sure you make the right hires? Why pre-hire assessments help that? We'll go through a demo and then we'll get to the Q&A as well. So let's dive in and let's get started right here, which is the hiring process. And look, this is something we've all been through. Anybody that's literally on this call, you have a job, you've been through this, right? You finally make a connection to your new company. You're excited. You've lined up that initial phone screen, and guess what? It went well. Step one in the hiring process is done. Now what? For tech roles, like most of what we talk about here today, most of what the pre-hire assessments are about, the next step is almost always a tech screen. And this is where it can get interesting, right? Everything from straightforward questions like, tell me about a time you've implemented X, to, well, how much oxygen is in the atmosphere, are totally fair game. It's wild. And as the breadth of these types of questions implies here, these types of interviews and both steps in this interview process so far are fairly prone to bias. We ask inconsistent questions. We're not asking the same questions of every candidate. The way we read and react to those can be inconsistent. We can have bias show up in those. And the harder part about this too is it's really difficult to measure because of all this inconsistency, because of the potential for bias. It's really difficult to measure across candidates. But pause on that thought for a minute. You did great. You passed the technical interview. And now we're on that part where, you've moved on to what's likely to be different stage gates of different more senior executives, right? So you might start with a director, you might start with a VP, escalate to a CTO, something like that. This is where it's like these escalating rounds of seniority. And so maybe during that time, you talk with somebody outside the department, but that tends to be how these go. You continue to do well, right? You made it all the way to the tech challenge, AKA whiteboard time. And again, here, let's dive into something for a minute, because here's a stat I find super interesting. On the company side, you've just spent countless time with candidates so far, multiple candidates throughout this process. And the methods of getting to know these candidates that we've covered, primarily resumes and interviews, typically don't yield the best insight. And that can play to the candidate's advantage. Research indicates that up to 78% of applicants misrepresent themselves. And interviews like the ones we've talked about here, especially that are unstructured, are subjective and ultimately serve as poor indicators of job performance. You have different levels of interview training by the people at your company. You have different levels of people saying, hey, I'm cool, and this person I'm talking to is like me, so they're cool too. And inflicting that bias, you have different levels of people going with their gut. There's all kinds of things that can come into this, and nothing is concrete. Nothing that helps decide the fate of these candidates. Nothing that can help determine where they're strong and they're weak. And here's another big one that this one blew my mind. 78% of candidates misrepresent themselves, but 66% of hiring managers don't care. So we've all kind of accepted that we're going to misrepresent ourselves during the interview process, and the people on the other side of the table are okay with it. That's where we're at. But maybe there's another way that can take that bias out, give us a non-biased, more accurate depiction of someone's strengths and weaknesses, a more modern solution for what would the last step there be, the whiteboard test. And something that we can do even before we invest a ton of time into multiple candidates. And that's what pre-hire assessments are all about. Validated pre-hire assessments are a more reliable and objective method of getting key tech-related strengths and weaknesses on candidates. And it keeps measurements consistent across the pool of candidates. And you can use this information that you gather here to make better informed, more defensible hiring decisions. And by the way, one of the other nice advantages of understanding somebody's strengths and weaknesses when you're in the hiring process, knowing where they're strong at with tech and where they might need more help, you can use this to begin their onboarding. Are they good at AWS, but they need help in multi-cloud environments? Well, you can have a learning path waiting for them when they start. And you can get them up to speed faster and train with more precision thanks to this knowledge. And like just about everything else here at Cloud Academy, these pre-hire assessments are customizable. You can pull from our library the off-the-shelf stuff of more than 1,000 assessments, and you can either use those or combine those with different options that make sense for your environment, your rules, and you can tailor what's going on in there, what questions are asked, to get even more specific on the skill knowledge. So you can start with the out-of-the-box stuff, and it's really great if you've ever used our assessments overall, you understand that. But then you can get really specific or even customize it to your environment or to specific questions that you want to know an answer to. So all of that's applicable here. And here's a good sampling of the skills and the tech that we can assess. We have more than 1,000 assessments, as I mentioned, and they cover these different broad topics of technologies, the different providers in cloud, the different topic areas that you might be concerned about. And then there's kind of this, more of a listing at the bottom here that gets a little bit more specific on each. Jermaine will walk through more of this and kind of show you a little bit more as he goes through the demo. But all of this together allows you to get a better, more accurate depiction of a client, of a candidate, sorry. All of this helps you stand out with candidates too in your hiring process because you're going to be transparent, right? Here's what we're assessing on. They'll see their score, you'll see their score, and it helps them to understand their strengths or weaknesses just like it's helping you. And what that means is that you're starting out on a very transparent foot. Because you're assessing them during this process, you're going to be a little bit more efficient. It's going to take less gut, less time with candidates that might not be your right fit. And then there's this cost savings, right? If you hire somebody that's not a good fit, it's going to lead to turnover, whether voluntary or not. And that's going to create some instability on the team. That's going to prevent you from taking advantage of opportunities that are all time sensitive now. Everything is. So there's these benefits that come along with it as well on both the applicant side as well as yours. And combined, what all this does is it really helps you hire the best fit faster, right? That's why we built this. It's a natural extension of the assessments that you have in there today, but it lets you assess that pool of candidates in order to find somebody, those diamonds in the rough, understand where somebody's at more quickly than you might be able to otherwise. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jermaine, who's going to walk through a little bit more in depth the actual demo. As we probably indicated at the top, we're here for your questions. Go ahead and chat those in as you think about them or as any that have come up so far, and we'll get to those as soon as Jermaine's done here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sean. So hello, everyone. Thank you again for your time and joining us today. My name is Jermaine Hernandez, and I'm a senior sales engineer here with Cloud Academy. If you've purchased with us within the past 2 years, there's a decent chance that you've heard my voice, you've heard me demoing to you and showing you what our product can really do. And I'm very, very excited to be here with you today to show you this pre-hire assessment and what it can really do to help you and your organizations. So we'll start with onboarding and what that looks like from an administrative perspective. It's very familiar to what you're used to, so that part will be incredibly brief. But then I'll show you what the onboarding looks like for a candidate. But most importantly, we'll circle back to the administration panel and really take a deep dive into the reporting and analytics that results from all of this. And once more, please don't be shy and throw those questions into the chat. So what you're seeing now is a very, very familiar administration panel. As you can see here, we do have a condensed tabs over on the left-hand side. So when we're initially onboarding candidates, there's really two routes that you're probably fairly familiar with. We can do it piecemeal-wise by inviting a user, then creating a team, and then assigning an assessment to that team. There's a different flow here. When you're ready to create a pre-hire assessment, you can actually create the team on the fly. At the second step is where we will then begin selecting our onboarding assessments. In case you have not noticed, now that this is external facing for this pre-hire motion, perhaps you've noticed that we have made every single exam within our library available to you to leverage through this functionality. In case anybody is unfamiliar, please keep in mind that what makes these lab challenges unique is that they are completely unguided. So this is exactly what Sean was mentioning. No more guessing and assuming that the skills on their resume is what they have. Now we can truly put them to the test and understand those practitioner level skills. And once we've done selecting, at step 3, we can either invite users, or if we've already invited them, simply add them to the team. So the administration onboarding is fairly familiar. Now let's transition and see what it looks like for a candidate. So after a candidate receives the email invitation, they'll go through the same exact account creation method as a typical user would go through. And immediately upon activating the account, we really want to direct their attention to these onboarding assessments. So as soon as they land on their dashboard, they're immediately looking at the list of a variety of assessments that have been assigned. And as a reminder, you are not limited to a single assessment. You can mix and match however you please. In this case, I actually presented the candidate with both a text-based exam and a lab challenge. So jumping into these, hopefully you've seen what these look like. The text-based exam are question by question, select 1, select 2, select 3. I know I'm not going to do very well here since I skipped so much, but I'll go ahead and submit. If there are additional pre-hire assessments to be completed, I will then be instructed to complete those. And upon completing the final assessment, I will be presented with one final thank you message. You will be contacted by your company. From this point, they will then land on their typical end user dashboard where they might see a list of free content that they can access, or maybe even encourage them for a free trial in case that they're not offered a position by you. So what does this look like for administrators, managers, and folks in HR? So once you have a few candidate pools, you'll be able to see from a high level how many are still in progress, along with how many have already completed the assessments. In this case, as soon as you jump in, you'll see that one user is only halfway through, so we might need to wait for them to complete it. Otherwise, we can navigate to the Complete tab and actually see the individual user assessment scores. And at the very top, we're already pointing out who some of the high flyers are, along with what the candidate pool is looking like with the average score. So now, if we're very interested in potentially offering Ryan here a position, we can say that he did quite well on the assessment, but we want advanced details. We really want to understand what it is that he knows and how he compares to that pool. So what you're firstly seeing here over on the left-hand side is a spider graph showcasing in the light gray the average score for this candidate pool. And in blue, we're seeing how Ryan performed comparatively so. In addition to that, we're seeing the overall assessment results on the right-hand side. We're seeing that he clearly did the best on both of these examinations. Here is the average score. We'll jump into one of these in a second, because before I jump into the actual assessment, we're also going to give you a very high level understanding of how they're performing across these skills. So what you're seeing in this light blue is the average score for this specific skill, specific platform, specific domain. And in green is where Ryan is landing. So you can see here that he's really knocking it out the park, really shined across each and every single one of these skills, basically. If we really want to get a high level understanding of how these candidates responded within the text-based exams or labs, we can click in for further details, including the ability to review their question responses. So if you're interested in what questions were wrong, what they were asked, how they responded, this is a phenomenal way to really get that high level understanding broken down by question. So I am seeing a couple of questions here. One of the ones that I'm seeing is, can we specify due dates for the assessment? For the time being, the standard and default will be a week from the assignment of assessment, but that's something that we're actively looking at with our product team. There is another question, can we brand this landing page with our logo? Not that I'm seeing yet. Sean, please correct me if I'm wrong. For the time being, the only branding that comes out of the box is the ability to brand the actual panel by adding your own logos.
Yeah, that's right, Jermaine. I think the other thing I'd add to what you were answering before about the due dates for the assessment, correct me if I'm wrong here as well, with the due date that's in there, like you said, by default a week, we do send reminders if there has not been any, if nobody's started or completed the assessments yet. Is that correct?
I believe so. I am also seeing a third question. Can we time bound the assessment? Essentially ensuring that they complete within a specified time period. So this is something that you could theoretically dictate through our content engine. So Sean mentioned it very briefly, but through content engine, you have complete control over customizing these pre-assessments. So part of that is you dictating the amount of time allowed within a lab environment if you're creating a lab challenge, or dictating the amount of time for a written text-based assessment. Otherwise, all of our text-based assessments already come with a specified time limit.
Yeah, those are great questions. Keep chatting, man. It looks like we have some more coming in as well. But yeah, keep asking your questions as we walk through this.
So with that, the last piece that I'll remind you, of course, because we brought it up, keep in mind that you'll still have access to Content Engine. If any of you have yet to play around with Content Engine within the Enterprise panel, I highly encourage you to do so. This is one of the things that makes it so incredibly unique, is the ability to create all of this context around the exams, the labs, and whatnot. So please come in here, play around with creating questions and exams, or even creating labs. So there are a couple more questions coming in. Oh, this is a good question. The question is, can we see how long they take to answer each question? So if we get it, so that we can get an idea whether they're referring to context during the exam, which they were not supposed to do. So unfortunately, this is not existing today, but that is a very good suggestion and something that I can take back to my product team.
But you can also, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jermaine, see the how much time it took them overall, right? Which can be a good indicator of that.
I believe that is available. Apologies. And there is another question, Sean, maybe you can help me with this one. If the reminder sending is indeed supported, can the message be customized like the internal reminders?
Yeah, so the reminders to candidates, not currently, not their auto reminders that fire out. Again, good piece of feedback and something that we'll look to get on the roadmap in the future as we look to allow you to customize more of this.
Yeah, but to kind of wrap up here, the demo, with this information, this is where you start to move forward. We only got really one qualified candidate, so it's up to you if you want to put him into a second round, if you want to reopen the pool, get a few more candidates in there. So this is going to be some very, very powerful pieces of technology to help you with hiring the right talent. And so with that,
Awesome.
Sean, that's all I have. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing and stick around in case I can help answer any more questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jermaine. Nice job. We'll see if other questions come in as I get the slides back up here. Just give me one moment. There we go. Okay. So yeah, that was the quick overview today. And this is one of those things that we're super excited about, that we think this is a natural extension of, if you want to understand the skills that an applicant has, we would call this skills intelligence. If you understand where the strengths and weaknesses are, you obviously already have that ability to do today within your Cloud Academy application for your current employees. This is just a natural extension, and it allows you to start that process earlier. So not only are you understanding if they're a good fit for the job based on how you lined up the description for it, but this allows you to get that intelligence earlier and really just start them on a good path, right? This should be a great advantage for both you and them to understand where their strengths reside and where you might need a little bit more support with them. And like we talked about, you can use the content engine as they onboard to really customize that training distinctly for them, so that if they're good in one area, you can train them up in others pretty quickly, just by assigning those learning paths. And even like we covered, you can have your own content, your own onboarding training documents in there as well. So this starts to complete that full skill intelligence for us, right? This is the front end of it. You have the middle part of it. This is a really solid, it should give you a really solid understanding of where your team's at before they start and while they're working with you and as they advance their careers with you. So really greatly appreciate everybody's time today. And if you do have further questions on this, please respond to us in email, reach out to your Cloud Academy rep. We're trying to be very aggressive with how we look at pricing this right now, and the options that are available to you. So really appreciate the time. Look forward to more discussions on this in the future. And thank you, everybody, for your time today. We'll talk with you soon.